Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. So, uh, we'll just continue with our second part of our lecture uh, on the topic radiographic techniques, safety, and protection. These are the overall learning outcomes. And today we'll be focusing a lot about the projection geometry and processing of radiographs. So, in to just reiterate, in our last class, or like last lecture class, we just discussed a little about the radiographic films that we use in intraoral radiology, and we saw what a film packet constitutes and the composition of a radiographic film. Now, we'll take it through the further steps. So, just to again remind you that there are three major steps in terms of intraoral radiology. First is taking of the radiograph, second one is processing, and third one is interpreting the radiograph. Okay, to start off with, we are still in the part taking the radiograph. So, we are going through the components of taking the radiograph, or the participants in taking the radiograph one by one, in which we radiographic films the last time. So, overview of the intraoral radiology machine. We'll be reading a little in detail about it as we go on further, when we talk more about radiation production, uh, radiation physics, how X-rays are produced, and what is the armamentarium that is required for production of X-rays. We'll be reading, or we'll be learning in detail about what is this about this intraoral radiology machine. But this is just to give an overview as you're going to be operating it. So this radiology machine has three main components you have to remember. So commercially, these intraoral radiology machines are available in two variants. One is your wall mounted, which you see on the left side, and another one is a mobile unit, which is fixed to a you know a wheeled pole which can be moved around within your practice clinic. So these are the two variants. There is one more variant which is a portable intraoral radiology machine, which we have not included here. The reason being, it's not a very popular choice because the whatever techniques that we apply during intraoral radiology generally cannot be applied or practiced using a portable machine. It changes the dynamics of taking an intraoral X-ray, almost totally changes, and general guideline or a general consideration for using a portable machine is when we are not able to uh, you know uh, mobilize a conventional intraoral radiology unit to that particular area where the imaging has to take place. So it's not a very popular choice. The most commonly, around let's say even 99% places, these are the two types that are generally used. So the fixed one will always lie beside the dental chair and interim procedure, it is very useful interim procedure for you to it is in the within the reach of the dentist or the operator, and is able to simultaneously take images, especially in endodontic therapy, when multiple radiographs have to be taken during the process like your working length or your master cone selection, etc. So you don't have to keep moving with the patient's file in the mouth, you don't have to keep moving the patient here and there. The other alternative that we have here is a mobile usage of a mobile unit. When one particular unit has to be shared by multiple work areas, this will be a very good choice of machine. In PIDC, most of the all the three machines, intraoral machines that we have, are mobile units which can be moved around, but we don't generally do because there are strict regulations as to radiation protection and safety. So that is apart from for another discussion. But just remember this: we have, so either be it a wall mounted or be it a mobile unit, the basic constituent or the main parts are three structures. The first one is the tube head, which you see at the further end with the projection out of it, which you see in the far right top corner. You see that is called the tube head. You can see it is present in both the units. So this is going to be the your source of X-ray, within which the tube, Coolidge tube is there, in which the X-rays are produced, and it is directed towards, consists within it the step up and step down transformers, and it also consists of regulators and everything. So this is called the tube head, and you can see there is a cone like thing that is projecting out. Just keep them in mind. This is going to be through which the X-rays are going to be sent out from the machine, or this is going to be the path through which the X-rays are going to be sent out to the machine. So tube head is component number one. Number two is the arm which is holding the tube head. So you have a vertical arm and you have a horizontal arm. So the reason for having these arms is the ability to move the X-ray head to various sides. So you might have to take the left side, the right side, you might have to do the projection from above, from below. So you need to have that malleability, that is your ability to move the tube head. That too, keep in mind that the tube head is going to be very heavy because it is lead coated, and it has a protective layer with insulating oil, so it's going to be quite heavy, and these arms tend to dissipate that weight, so it is easy for the operator to mobilize this tube head around the patient. So this horizontal and vertical arm, and finally on the right hand corner end, what you see is called below, what you see is called a control panel. And this control panel is where you are going to do the settings, that is you are going to measure the time of exposure. In terms of intraoral radiology, you are going to measure the time of exposure. Previously this used to be a very elaborate one, but recent ones, due to the advancement of digital technology, now they give you prefixed measurements, that is you just choose the tooth and the size of the patient, that is more than enough for exposure. So there is a control panel, and among this all middle you see something like a remote near the mobile unit, that is called a trigger, so which will be outside or beyond the barrier from which the operator will expose, so that only the patient or the X-ray gets, and the X-ray gets exposed, no one else gets X-ray exposure. So this will be always placed outside or behind a barrier, this trigger. So remember these parts: the tube head, the horizontal and vertical arm, and your control panel, and you have your trigger. So just keep this in mind. We'll talk a much more detail about this when we have a live demonstration. All of this than shown in picture, when you see it live, it makes much more sense, but this one I'm just telling you so that you get a general idea as to uh, how how an intraoral radiology machine looks like. Okay, the control panel that I was talking about, as I mentioned before, you can see that on the top there are pictures of molars, canines and incisors, and there are also indications for other radiograph. So all you have to do is you have to choose which teeth you are going to take X-ray of, intraoral X-ray of, and you get ready, present the ready preset button, go behind the barrier or go out of the room and expose the patient. So this is the control panel. Okay, so here uh, the type of radiography that we are going to majorly discuss is going to be IOPAR, or intraoral periapical radiograph. So we all know what are the different types of radiographs that are there, and the majority of the radiographs that you are going to take in your general dental practice, the majority of X-rays is going to be primarily your IOPAR, intraoral periapical radiography. Hence, and also there is a little bit complexity to the there are a little bit complexity of the techniques that involved in acquisition or taking the IOPAR. So that is why we are starting with IOPAR. So periapical radiography, there are basically two techniques to take an intraoral periapical radiograph. One is called the paralleling technique, and another one is called the bisecting angle technique. We'll see a little bit in detail about both of this. To start off with the paralleling technique, so what we must understand is that the paralleling technique is based on the principle of parallelism. Parallelism means your receptor and the long axis of your tooth will be parallel to each other, and the central ray of the X-ray will be directly perpendicular to both the long axis of the tooth and the film. The idea is that by having the receptor parallel to the object of interest at a at a certain dimension, you are able to acquire the same dimension, the image of the same dimension in the intraoral X-ray. This is the basic principle of your paralleling technique. Okay, so here uh, there are a few tips for film placement, and this applies for both the paralleling and horizontal, most of them. The wide side of the film always faces the teeth. The That is the exposure side. Last time, if you remember, I said there is an exposure side and non-exposure side. So the wide side is usually the exposure side, so it always faces the object of interest or the tooth of interest and towards the X-ray tube. The anterior for imaging anterior tooth, the films are always placed vertically. Why? Because the roots of the anterior teeth, upper and lower anterior teeth, tend to be longer. That is, the dimension of the tooth tend to be longer, and they are narrower by width and longer by length. So that is why we place the films vertically, whereas for posterior films we place it horizontally. Why? Because the tooth are wider in terms of breadth and also shorter in terms of height. So we tend to place them horizontally so that you can easily cover 2 to 3 number of teeth in with one film. And the identification dot, can also be, they call it under different names in different textbooks and different areas. It is also called the occlusal dot. The identification dot is always placed facing the occlusal line. So when you bite, you might have done your preclinical prosthodontics. So when you put both your upper and lower arches into occlusion, there is something called as occlusal line where you register the bite. Remember? So that is called the occlusal line. So once a patient opens the mouth, so this is called the bite. This is the occlusal bite. And when patient opens the mouth, there is a maxillary occlusal line and mandibular occlusal line. So the identification dot is always positioned along the occlusal line of the tooth of interest, and always position the film holder away from the teeth and toward the middle of the mouth, and always center the film over the areas to be examined. Please remember this. Sometimes you might have to take you know third molars where the films might not be accessible that much, but still we try to bring the tooth of interest as much as center to the film as possible, so that accidentally there is less chance of the tooth of interest being cut off after the final image is produced. So these general laws apply to both paralleling and the bisecting angle technique. For paralleling technique, I told you that it is based on the principle of parallelism. So this image shows you exactly what I was talking about. So you can see that the long axis of the tooth, and you can also see the film, that is the receptor, is parallel to each other, and the central ray from the X-ray tube source is perpendicular to the long axis of the tooth and the film. Now what, because by making it parallel, what you can observe is the film is at the exact dimension of the tooth, and it is covering the tooth from the incisal edge to the apex of the tooth. Okay, and when a central ray passes through the tooth, an exact replica of that image, when it is placed parallel, an exact replica of that image is, you are supposed to get it on the receptor. Okay, so how do we achieve this parallelism? That leads us to the devices that are used. We'll see a little bit in detail about these devices as we go on. Next is positioning the film inside the patient's mouth. Here, what we have to remember is we use an apparatus to achieve this parallelism. Normally, it cannot be achieved by with a free hand. So you need a device to do that. So how we do that is by using something ring device. Okay, so these devices are commercially available, and there are different variations that are available for the anteriors and the posteriors. So this is the apparatus that we'll be using. You can see that there is a ring like you know a ring like structure in the device with which we will be coinciding the tube of the that is the X-ray tube, and on the other end we are going to keep the film facing the tube, the occlusal the exposure side, and we are going to put this ring within the patient's mouth. Okay, there is a variation to this that is available. The green color one which you see is again you know a device that is available for especially exclusively for endodontic procedures. Let's just focus that we have a device for achieving paralleling technique for now. Let's get into details while we discuss demonstration, while we actually see the device in person. You will get a much clearer idea. So, talking about the positioning of the device inside the patient's mouth. Okay, here the dentist, it is not a very technique sensitive. It's not very complex. It is actually quite straightforward and quite simple to take a paralleling an IOPA using a paralleling technique, because the device I talked about, the ring device which we saw before in the picture, does most of the work for you. So what you do is you place the film along the slot that is given, and you position it just like how it is shown in the picture. You position it inside the patient's mouth, and you just align the tube with the ring like device that is there, which is the position indicating device, along the ring that is given. So there will be markings which you have to coincide, and then you just take the radiograph. All you have to ensure is that your radiograph is covering the your tooth of interest. That's it. The most of the other part of the X-ray is done for you by the device. So this is very straightforward. It is very easy to do. It is very easy to do, and it is also a very sought out kind of a technique. If you want a very accurate, or if you want a very good representation of the tooth of your interest, this is a very sought out technique for taking an IOPR, that is your paralleling technique. So this is the positioning for the maxillary incisor region. This is your positioning for the maxillary canine region. So it is all the same way. As you can see in the image on the right side top, you can see that the receptor is placed along, that is the black line represents the film, and it is placed along the the slot that is given, and the patient is biting on the device, and the tube is kind of coinciding with the position indicating device is coinciding with the ring that is given in the device, and you get a very good resultant radiograph. So this is for the can, this is for the premolar region, and this is for the molar region. Now for the anterior region, since we are going to place the film a little vertical, it has a different set, that is within a variation within the apparatus, and if you are going to use it for posteriors, it has a different set. So you would have seen multiple in the previous images. We would have shown you blue, yellow, red color and green color. So the blue color coded device is generally used for the anteriors, that is from canine to canine, be it upper canine to canine, lower canine to canine, because in that slot you are going to place the film vertical. Okay, and what we have to again remember is that when you are going to the lower teeth, you will have a very good amount of space to lodge the film, because the lower lingual sulcus is quite deep, so you'll have a good amount of slot to kind of like position the film comfortably along. But whereas in the upper tooth, it is not going to be very comfortable. You have to take it almost to the mid palate area to achieve some amount of height where you can place the film to some extent, and also there will be a little bit of tilting, which is very normal, nothing to worry about. These kind of variations that happens while using this apparatus and taking an IOPAR, it will you will be able to understand it much better when we show you a live demonstration, or you can also refer to the YouTube videos that have been posted in the PIDCU tab. This is for the mandibular region, mandibular posterior region. So in all of this, the principle remains the same, and the device does most of the job for you. All you have to do is position the position the device correctly inside the patient's mouth and ensure that your tube is directly coinciding with the or your PID, position indicating device, is directly coinciding with the ring. So you do this, you achieve a very good radiograph. So this is generally the principle for all of these radiographs that we have seen before, both the maxillary and the mandibular region. Okay, so to go back, like I told, it is a very sought after modality or technique for achieving an IOPAR, but it is not still a very popular choice of taking an IOPA because of two main reasons. I told you its advantages. You get a very good replica of your, in terms of dimensions. So it is a very sought after. And number two is it requires a less skill. The technique is very simple. So taking the radiograph is also very easy. These are the advantages. Whereas when you want to talk about the disadvantages of paralleling technique, what, what we have to remember is that paralleling technique requires this particular RIN device. This RIN device is not, you know, it's not a very, a cheap device, and it is quite expensive, and it is also, it's also something that, goes away with wear and tear. So you will have to, depending on your usage, you will have to constantly, buy new ones. They are not very cheap. They are comparatively expensive. And number two is, uh, the patient needs to be dentulous. That is, the patient needs to have teeth to be able to bite on that particular device. If the patient is edentulous, then the patient will not be able to bite and hold the device. The entire device is held by the patient's bite, how strong the patient bites on the biting area of the device. And if the patient does not have a teeth, then there is not going to be stability to the device, because of which the device is going to be moving up and down, and eventually because of which there is a chance that the image you get might get deteriorated. So this technique of paralleling using a ring device cannot be achieved very easily or comfortably with in an edentulous patient, and it is generally not advised also. It is not taken in a edentulous patient also. And sometimes it is very difficult to use this device especially in patients who have a very shallow arch, upper maxillary arch, and patients especially who have smaller dental arches, because this device is constructed on a general consensus of the based on the IOPA film. Now the IOPA film by itself is very flexible, but this the device which supports the IOPA inside the patient's mouth, the ring device, is not that flexible. So sometimes patients with a very shallow arch or with a very small arch, who have a very small upper and lower mandibular and maxillary arches, it is going to be very difficult for you to take this device inside the patient's mouth and the patient's ability to hold this device inside the patient's the lodge this device inside the patient's mouth because of its rigidity is going to be very difficult. So these are the areas where it is where you cannot use the paralleling technique. Hence comes bisecting angle technique. So the bisecting angle technique is another way of taking an IOPAR. Okay, in bisecting angle technique is based on the Szysinski's rule of isometry, or they just call it the rule of isometry. So whereas when two triangles are equal and they share a complete side, then it has two equal angles. It means that the dimension of both the triangles on either side is going to be the same. So isometry, which means similarity. So when there are, we'll see a pictographic representation in the next slide. The bisecting angle technique is based on a geometric principle of bisecting a triangle, which means dividing a triangle into two parts. And the angle formed by the long axis of the teeth and the film is bisected, and the X-ray beam is directed perpendicular to the bisecting angle technique. Now, to explain it a little more in detail, the image A that you see is a triangle. Basically, the blue line is a triangle. Now what we are going to do is we are going to divide this triangle into equal halves with a bisecting line. That is called the dotted line you see in the middle is called the bisecting line. Okay, this sounds a little geometrical, like a bit of mathematics, but just bear with me. We need to understand the principle of this technique if we are going to effectively use it on the patient. So just bear with me, bear with this mathematic, this thing, just for a minute. Okay, so when this bisecting line, this imaginary or this dotted bisecting line divides this triangle in equal halves, and the angle that is shared by the bisecting line, and this divides, let's say for example, now because of this division there are two triangles, and this dividing line forms the same angulation with both the sides of the triangle, then the line from A to B is equivalent to line from A to D. So this is the principle of here. So now the line of A to D is going to represent your tooth, the long axis of your tooth. The line AB is going to represent your film, that is the receptor. Now if you want the exact, or the the image of A to D without deterioration, that is without getting blurred out or without getting blown up or shrunk or anything like that, you want to get almost exactly the same image, that is you want the image, the line A to D in A to B, then your central ray, that is the central ray, that is the from the X-ray, is should be directed towards the imaginary bisecting line, which is A to C. So the line A to D in a patient's oral cavity is evident. Okay, so that is going to be the long axis of the tooth. The receptor is evident. Okay, A to B, that is going to be your IOPA, that is you're going to be your IOPA film. But you have to imagine a line A to C, that is this dotted line, the imaginary bisecting line, and this imaginary bisecting line you are going to direct your central ray. You can see the image in now in the B image. You can see that one side of the triangle is formed by the long axis of the tooth, and one side of the triangle is formed by the film. Now an imaginary bisecting line, the dotted line is formed, and your central ray is not aimed at the long axis of the tooth nor the film, it is aimed at the imaginary bisecting line. So it's a mathematical principle on which this entire technique is based upon. So for achieving this technique, we do not actually need any particular device. That is, if you take previously, that is, let us say like 10, 15 years back, even when we were, BDS students, about 15 years back. So what we would have generally done, snap array, this device was available, but mostly what we would do is we'll push in the film inside the patient's mouth, and we'll ask the patient to hold the film inside the patient's mouth. So this is how generally it was taken. This does not actually need any specific device. You can actually ask the patient to hold the film inside the patient mouth, but then there is a small setback to it, that the patient's fingers get unnecessarily exposed. So they didn't want the patient to hold the film inside the mouth. So they had to come up with something to position the film inside the patient's mouth and keep it stable there. So there were a lot of things that were tried. They used to use artery forceps. They used to use some clip holders and everything to keep it stable inside the patient's mouth. Then later they developed something called as a snap array, what you see on the image now. So this is a device with which the film, instead of directly straightforwardly placing directly on this thing, you place the film on this device and you put it inside the patient's mouth, and the patient bites on the flat surface of this device. The film is held and positioned securely, so that the patient does not have to use their finger to hold the film inside the patient, so any exposure to the hand is prevented. So this device can be used. Apart from blocks like this that are available, which you push in, especially which you see on the far and left side. A block like this is available. You just place the film and you put it inside the patient's mouth, and you ask the patient to bite, and once the patient bites, then it is held in position. Or if that is edentulous, you can still use a modified needle holder which comes with a bite it is not a very popular choice or commercially available. When patient is completely edentulous, we do not use a bite at all because the patient will not be able to properly bite. So we generally position the film inside the patient's mouth and we ask the patient to hold it for you, or we can use a modified needle holder device like this which has a bite over it, on which after you place the patient can bite over it. Okay, so this is how this snap array device is used. For posterior teeth, like I told you before, we secure the film on the device like shown in the top image, and for posterior, this is for the posterior, and for the anterior, you use the other end of the device, which is like almost like a bite fork. You just position it. Okay, now that we have seen how we are going to, so if you are going to take an image using bisecting angle technique, there are three things that you have to keep in mind. First is the positioning of the film, which you are going to achieve using the snap array, or you are going to position the film inside the patient's mouth, and you are going to ask the patient to hold it, or you are going to use a bite block. So there are variations. So first is positioning the film. You have to position the film properly. So remember what I told you at the beginning before when we gave the intro for paralleling techniques. Those general principles, all those principles apply here too. For posterior teeth, you have to position the film horizontally, and for anterior teeth the film has to be positioned vertically. And remember, the occlusal dot always should be facing towards the occlusal line. The white side will always be facing the tooth, and the non-exposure side will be facing away from the tooth of interest. Okay, so and also ensure that the tooth of interest lies almost at the center of the film. So this is positioning the film inside the patient mouth. And second important thing is head position of the patient, which we'll be seeing as we go on. Second one is the head position of the patient, and third one is for bisecting angle technique, most importantly, the position of the tube head. The position of the tube head. Here comes two phenomenon, which is called the horizontal angulation and vertical angulation. Like I told you, while the vertical and horizontal arm of the X-ray machine helps you to move the tube around, this is totally entirely dependent for this is totally different from what we told before, and this is exclusively for the bisecting angle technique, where you are able to move the tube head, that is the position indicating device, up and down, left and right. Okay, when you move it from left right, it's called the horizontal angulation, and when you move it up and down, it is called the vertical angulation. Now the vertical angulation is graduated, which you can see in the right hand top corner. It is graduated. So you have a positive angulation, vertical angulation, and you also have a negative vertical angulation. Whereas for horizontal angulation, there is neither positive nor negative. It is just horizontal angulation. Whereas in vertical angulation, you have a positive and negative. So when you move up, that is when you raise the tube head upward, it is negative angulation. When you move it downward, it is positive angulation. So the horizontal angulation refers to the positioning of the tube head, direction of the central X-ray in a horizontal or side-to-side plane. The horizontal angulation remains the same when you are using the paralleling or bisecting angle technique. So the horizontal angulation is the same for both paralleling and bisecting. The here is an indication as to how the horizontal angulation occurs. When you move the tube head sideways, that is from left to right, it is called horizontal. Okay, and how do you do a correct? How do you know that your horizontal angulation is correct? Because here you do not have a ring or any or any guiding device for you to for you to show that your angulation is correct. So how do you achieve a correct horizontal angulation? With correct horizontal angulation, the central ray is directed perpendicular to the curvature of the arch and through the contact areas of the teeth. And incorrect horizontal angulation results in overlapping of the contact areas, and a film with overlapped contact areas cannot be used to examine the interproximal areas of the teeth. So how do you achieve this correct horizontal angulation? You have to ensure that the tube head, the surface of the tube head, the external surface or the nozzle of the tooth head, the surface is almost parallel to that of the tooth of interest, or the central ray is directly aimed between the interdental areas, not at the tooth but at the interdental areas, so you are able to distinctly get each teeth. So if you make a mistake in that, if you, instead of directing towards the interdental area, you focus on the tooth and you make a mistake in horizontal angulation, what will happen as a result is that one tooth will overlap over the other in your resultant image, because of which the diagnostic quality of the image will. So this is how your central beam is focused. Okay, so your central beam in spaces in each tooth, so you are able to individually see each tooth in your resultant X-ray. Incorrect horizontal angulation, again, when you are not, when the rays do not pass through the interdental areas. Here you can see that on the radiographic image that tooth is overlapping. The mesial cusp of the second molar is overlapping the distal portion of the first molar. You can see it in, especially in the upper and also in the lower. You can see that there is overlap. This kind of overlap leads to reducing the diagnostic quality of the image, because we will not be able to clearly say between the interdental area whether there is any carious lesion or not. Moving on to the vertical angulation, like I told you, for vertical angulation we move the tube up and down, okay, up and down, and when we move it upwards, that is when we move the tube downwards and the tube upwards, that is when we move this tube part, the position indicating device downwards, it is called a positive angulation. When it is moved upwards, it's called a negative angulation. Over here where it is attached, you can see these graduations. These graduations are very important, because based on these graduation only we are going to be taking this X-ray. So for a correct vertical angulation, the results in radiographic image, that is the same length of the tooth. Incorrect vertical angulation results in image that is not as the same length. Either the tooth will be elongated or it will be shortened if we do a incorrect vertication. Moving on to head position. I told you the three components. First is film positioning, second one is head positioning, and third one is tube positioning. The head positioning is that always you have to ensure that the occlusal plane of the tooth of which you are going to take X-ray of should be parallel to the floor, or should be almost horizontal. Okay, so for taking a, when you are taking a maxillary radiograph, always the head remains straight. Now just try this simple exercise at your home. If you have a spoon, or if you have a tongue blade, or if you have a scale or something, just bite it between your teeth so that it is extending from out of your mouth, and sit straight. Okay, when you sit straight, you can see that the scale is almost parallel to the floor, that is, it is almost horizontal, it is straight, right? But for example, if I want, this is when I want to achieve a upper teeth, but if I want to achieve a lower teeth, now you can see that it is not exactly parallel to the floor. So what you do is you tilt the head a little bit, because after you place the film inside the patient's mouth, the mouth is not going to be closed. The mouth is going to be little open. It's not going to be closed, even though it's biting on a on a snap array, bite block, or anything like that. It is not going to be exactly closed. So the occlusal line of the maxilla and the mandible will vary a little bit. So that is why for achieving a horizontalness in your maxillary area, your head position has to be straight, and for achieving a horizontal occlusal line for your mandible area, you tilt the head a little bit backward, so that you are able to achieve this as shown in this image. So after you position the film inside the patient's mouth using a snap array, if it is for a maxillary tooth, if the IOP is going to be for a maxillary tooth, the patient has to sit straight and look straight. By that you will achieve that the occlusal line is almost horizontal, or in a way you can say it is parallel to the floor. But if it is going to be mandibular, then you ask the patient to tilt the head a little bit behind, so that the horizontal or the occlusal line is almost parallel to the floor. You can try this at home. What you can do is first place a metal scale or any flat a tongue blade or anything like that, ice cream stick or anything like that, with a little protrusion in front of a mirror. You just bite it and look straight. It will look horizontal. Okay.
But now once you open the mouth and you position this blade, okay, and you look straight, you can see that the maxillary one will be straight, whereas if you place it along the occlusal line, the tongue blade or this thing will be facing downward. So to bring that downward, parallel to the floor or horizontal, when you tilt your head back for the mandibular, you can see that it comes horizontal. So you can just try this, and we'll do when we do a demonstration, it will be you can understand it even better. So remember these 3 points. One is positioning of the film, second one is positioning of the head. Now third one, what we are going to see is the tube positioning. So tube positioning, I told you how to do the horizontal angulation. The horizontal angulation is determined as to passing the central rays through the interdental spaces, right? Okay, I told you the vertical angulation is graduated, and for this graduated vertical angulation, there is a predetermined. Now I told you this is based on bisecting angle technique, and I told you this bisecting line is going to be an imaginary line. Okay, after you place the film inside the patient's mouth and the patient bites, you will not be able to neither visualize the film nor the tooth completely. Probably you will be able to do it in the anterior teeth, but definitely not in the posterior teeth. It's going to be very difficult for you to visually, that is clinically visually, look at the film nor the tooth properly. So when you are not able to neither visualize clearly the tooth nor the receptor, that is the two ends of the triangle, how are we going to come to a conclusion that there is a bisecting line? So to give an edge towards that, or to overcome this difficulty, a predetermined you know measurement for angulation, or a measurement for you to aim the central beam of the X-ray, the imaginary bisecting angle line that we talked about has been already given. This is not a fixed number. Remember that it can vary plus or minus 5. But when you start taking a radiograph, when you start reading a radiograph, you start with these measurements, and in most of the adult individuals, this parameter will yield you a good result. Okay, but there will be certain modifications. Not everyone's morphology is the same. Some might have a narrow arch, some might have a wide arch, shallow arch, some might have a small arch, and they will not be able to accommodate. So there will be some variations. So you must always give plus or minus 5 degrees to whatever is mentioned here. Remember this, plus or minus 5. But this is what you initially go with. As you get experienced after taking, and you see what are the variations, the outcome of the variations that are there, then you by yourself will know how to adjust these angulations. Okay, so the angulations that are available for the maxillary and mandibular teeth, the incisor is maxillary incisor is plus 40 degree, because we all know that maxillary central incisor tooth are little flared out outside, and it is minus 15 for mandibular incisors. For canine it is plus 45, and mandible it's minus 20, and premolar it is plus 30, and mandible it is minus 10, and molar, maxillary molar is plus 20, and mandibular molar is minus 5. Now by heart, or keep these measurements in your mind, because every time you are going to make a bisecting angle technique, you cannot keep looking up for a chart or any for any paper or any electronic device to search for these numbers. So by heart, or keep these your numbers in your mind. Okay, so remember this. So how are we going to achieve this degree angulation? We'll see next. So this is how a normal radiograph works with bisecting angle technique. So how do we do it for a maxillary incisor? So you position the film inside the patient's mouth, and as you can see how the film is positioned in the first top and left top image, you can see how the film. So you are covering both the lateral and the central incisors, upper central incisors with the film. Okay, so you have to ensure that the film is covering all the 4 teeth. The film is placed vertically. So this is film positioning. and the image below you can see that the patient's head is straight and is looking straight at you. So head positioning. Number 3 is the positioning of the tube. Now you can see on the image below that the tube head is positioned towards the the film in a certain angulation. That is the angulation that was mentioned before. That is the plus 40 degree angulation that was mentioned before. Like this, what we do is only the vertical angulation is determined in terms of numerics. That is in plus or minus 10, 20, 30, 40 degrees. Okay, the horizontal angulation you have to aim and ensure that the central ray is passes through the interdental spaces. Okay, so this is how you achieve the upper center incisor. Even if you don't understand very clearly, don't worry about it. Just keep these three things in your mind. One is film positioning, number two is head positioning, number three is tube positioning. Keep these three things in your mind. You will get a better or a very clear picture once you see how it is done in live in a patient. Okay, so there is only this much of an explanation that can be done using a presentation. When there is a live demonstration, you get a much better idea. But before you do it live, or before you see what is happening in a live patient, if you know the theory or the principles of it, basically it will be easier for you to understand, follow and understand when it is shown in a live demonstration to you. That is the purpose of the lecture today. So this is similarly for a maxillary canine tube film position, head position and the tube position. This is how the tube will be positioned. And this is for maxillary premolar area. You can see that the patient is the film is positioned inside the patient mouth, and this purple this box shows exactly how the tooth is covered, and the position of the tube. Observe the position of the tube and the head also. For all the maxillary exposures, the patient's head will be straight and the patient will be looking straight. There will be not any forward or backward tilt of the head. This is for maxillary molar. All the images that I've shown you so far in terms of exposure, there are two things that changes. One is positioning of the film, second one is positioning of the tube head. You can see that the tube head has moved considerably from anterior to the posterior area along with the film. Now in this image you can see for the mandibular central area, now we can see that the patient film is positioned and the patient's head is tilted a little back, so that you achieve that little bit of parallelism with the occlusal line with the floor. And this is for maxillary incisor. This is for the canine, mandibular canine, mandibular premolar and the mandibular molar. In all these images, what you can notice is that the head position is little tilted backward for all these exposures, and the tube head positions. Here, one variation that you can notice is that there is not too much of negative angulation in the mandible, and there is a little bit of angulation in the when it comes to maxillary. The reason because when you do the teeth setting in your prosthodontics, you might have noticed that the mandibular tooth is placed inside and the maxillary teeth is placed outside. That is, when a tooth occludes, you can see that the maxillary buccal cusps are protruded outside and mandible is a little inside for you to achieve that occlusion, which also says that the mandibular tooth are almost positioned straight, whereas the maxillary tooth are a little flared out. Okay, so just keep this in mind. Don't get too confused. We'll discuss this further as we talk about it during the demonstrations. So remember this: mandibular, most of the projections, especially the posteriors, will be almost, the angulation will be very less, whereas the maxillary will be a little more. Just keep this in. So again, to reiterate, this degree of angulation, vertical angulation, just learn this, by heart this, or just record this in your mind, all these angulations. Okay. Okay. So again, going back, now we have taken the radiograph. Once we position, do the head position, film positioning, head positioning, and the tube positioning, we go to the control panel, we set the parameters, and we expose the radiograph. So now we have taken the radiograph. Once we have taken the radiograph, you cannot immediately visualize the image. The image is there in the film, but it cannot be visualized by a on by us on by our you know by us directly. So it has to go through a process called processing for the image to come out. Okay, until this moment, from exposing the radiograph until processing, this area is called the latency area, where you have a latent image. That is, the image is there, but it is just not visible yet. Once you process it, it becomes visible. So this invisible image that is present in the film in this latency period is called the latent image, which we discussed in our previous lecture. So again, from exposure of the film till processing, you have the latent image. Then you subject this film for processing, because you want to bring out this invisible image as a visible image on the film. Okay, so what you subject the film next is processing. So film processing is done using chemicals. It's the chemicals are called fixer and developer. And to do this processing, you have two major methods. One is called your manual processing, and another one is called your automatic processing. We have automatic processors, but here, for the sake of learning purpose, we do manual processing. So in manual processing, again, you have two methods. Okay, to briefly tell you about automatic processing, there is nothing much. All the chemicals are loaded into the apparatus. The automatic processor image is present on the right, and the below the lower image is the automatic processor. All the chemicals are already there. All you have to do is put your hand inside the processor, peel off under darkness. You peel off this thing, remove the film from the packet, and you drop it into a slot. And the machine will do the processing for you. That is, it will put the film through all the chemicals and all the necessary steps, and as an end result, you will get a processed radiograph. So you do not have to work for it. But whereas manual method, all the steps of processing you have to do it by yourself. So for achieving this manual processing, there are two methods. One is time and temperature method, another one is visual method. We'll see a little bit in detail about these methods as we go. So first we'll see what are the steps of processing. These steps involved in film processing is the same for both time, temperature, and visual method. I will tell you, after I tell you about processing, the basic processing steps, I'll tell you what is the difference in time, temperature, and visual method. But first, let's see what are the general components of both these methods, which is steps involved in the processing. First one is putting the film in developer. I'm sorry, the wording is not clear. It's called developing, or putting the film in developer. Then you rinse it in water, then you put it in fixer, and then you wash the film thoroughly and you get and dry it. Hence, you get a very clear image like it is shown. These are the steps involved in film processing. Okay, so what happens when you when you subject these images, all this. So this is just an overview as to, like, in a radiographic setup, how these things are set up. So you, in a general radiology setup, you have something called as a dark room. So in which the room will be dark. If you have seen any older movies where they develop x-rays, or where they even develop photographs, uh, um, I presume most of your millennials, you'll not be aware of film cameras. But if you have had the opportunity of using, or you know having seen a film camera used by your parents or your grandparents, or any time when you were very young, so what they generally do is, they'll have loaded a film roll inside the camera. They'll take the photograph and they will give it to the lab people to process it and to make it into photographs. So in a lot of films, you can see that there will be a dark room in which there will be a red light glowing, under which they will, like, process all these films. So this is called a dark room or processing room. So for x-rays also, since x-rays are sensitive to visible light, so you process them in a dark area. Here Instead of a dark room for dental x-rays, considering its size, you don't need such a large room to do it. So what we use is a compact solution, which is a box, a dark box, or a developing box for developing it, within which you achieve the same amount of, the darkness you achieve with a dark room, within which, and while you can still visualize what you're doing. Okay, so I told you there are the three important steps. One is developing, then putting it in water, then fixing it, then finally rinsing it thoroughly, and then drying. So first we are going to develop. Once we remove inside the box or inside the dark room, first we are going to open the packet and we are going to remove the film, put it in a holder, and then we are going to immerse, or we are going to put the film inside a developing solution. So what is the function of this developing solution is to convert the exposed silver halide crystals, which have the latent image, into metallic grains of silver. If you remember from the last lecture, I told you what happens when an X-ray, that is when we talked about the composition of the X-ray, what happens when an X-ray gets exposed. Okay, we told that the silver bromide or silver halide crystals that are present within the emulsion layer that is present in the film. Okay, there this exposed silver halide crystals, which consists of the image details within it. So for example, you take IUPA of your mandibular molar, the ones which are going to get more exposed, okay, the ones which are going to get more exposed are the ones which are apart from the teeth area, and which are within the teeth area not so much, right? So what happens is that this exposed silver halide crystals will be converted, this exposed silver halide crystals will be converted to metallic grains of silver by the developer solution. Okay, the composition of developer, it has developer, activator, preservative, and restrainer. We'll see these functions later. Then what we do is we put it in water. Why do we put it in? After doing the developing, we put it in water. Why do we put it in water? Because we want to remove whatever developing solution that is still stuck to the surface of the film. We want to remove it, so we rinse it in a small container of water nicely, and then we put it in a fixing solution. So what is the function of this fixing solution? It dissolves and removes the undeveloped or unexposed silver halide crystals from the emulsion. Thus it what happens is that so the image formation is based on the principle of subtraction. I'll tell this a little more detail to you once we go through the other steps of developing. So the composition of fixing solution is clearing agent, acidifier, preservative, and hardener. So let's see the what each component of a developer solution does. So a developing solution consists of basic constituent is a developer, which is either a phenidone or hydroquinone. It converts the exposed silver halide crystals, which is silver bromide or silver halide, into which has the latent image, into metallic grains of silver. And this also consists of an activator, which is usually sodium or potassium hydroxide with buffer, which is sodium bicarbonate. It contains it creates an alkaline environment, that is, it keeps the pH of the solution at number 10, which causes the gelatin wall to swell. Okay, so when we discuss the composition of the film, I told you that there is a super coat which is for protection of the emulsion layer. Otherwise, the emulsion layer might get damaged. So there is a super coat to protect the emulsion layer. Now, if this chemical has to penetrate through those protective layers and reach the emulsion, which consists of this silver halide crystals, it has to soften up. It has to soften up so it's able to absorb this chemical. So the role of the activator is to do this, that is softening up this external coat, the protective coat, so that the developer is absorbed within the film, and hence the silver halide crystals get converted. And preservative is to kind of give longevity for this chemical to be stored and used for a set amount of time, because it's a perishable product. It has an expiry, and for it to prevent, just like how we had food preservatives in food to keep it edible for a long time, so that it doesn't get spoiled very soon. Like that, for this solution to not get spoiled very soon, we have something called as a preservative, which is generally sodium sulfite, which is an antioxidant which prevents oxidation from atmospheric oxygen. And then you have the restrainer. The role of the restrainer is reduces development of unexposed silver halide. Okay, what we have to remember here is, as much equivalent to the developer, the role of the developer, we have the role of a restrainer. The role of the developer is to convert the exposed silver halide crystals, but in the process there should not be, you know, conversion of the unexposed silver halide crystals also, which can happen. And to prevent that from happening, we have something called as a restrainer, which is usually potassium bromide and benzotriazoles. Okay, and it also acts as an antifoggant. It helps in improving contrast to the resultant image. Moving on to the fixer, it consists of primarily a clearing agent, which is ammonium thiosulfate, which clears the film emulsion by dissolving and removing unexposed silver halide grains. Now, I told you, once we develop the uh, exterior coat, that is the protective coat, becomes spongy and it absorbs the developing solution, right? And this conversion of this silver halide crystal happens into solid silver grains. And then you, once enough developing is done, you move on to the water. You rinse it nicely. You try to remove whatever developing solution is there on the surface. Then remember, the super coat is still spongy. It is still, you know, it is still in this state of absorption. Now you put it inside the clearing agent. Now what this clearing agent, what this chemical does is, it dissolves and removes all the unexposed silver halide grains. By So what happens is, only the exposed silver halide grains which have been converted to silver grains are retained. All the unexposed silver halide grains are removed from the film totally. The second component of this, I remember I already told you, the image formation is based on subtraction, not by addition. Okay, so I'll explain it a little more clearly as we go on further. So the second component is acidifier. So remember, for a developer solution, we have to keep it al you know, alkaline. So the pH is maintained at 10, whereas here we have to keep it acidic in nature. So the pH is maintained from 4 to 4.5 using acetic acid. So what happens is that, and what happens is that this acidic pH helps in kind of the, you know, good diffusion of this thiosulfate, that is your clearing agent, within the emulsion, and gets it also out of the emulsion. So it not only puts it in and putting it out of the emulsion, and it also inactivates any activity of carryover developing agents. So what happens is that, I told you, once we do enough developing, then we rinse it on water. When we rinse it on water, what I told you is that the developing agent, whatever is over the surface, will get washed away, but there will be some amount of developing agent still retained within the, you know, the softened emulsion and the gelatin, the super coat. So to prevent that retained developing solution from acting any further, this acidifier helps. And finally, there is a preservative for fixer also, which prolongs its life, which is ammonium sulfate. And then there is our hardener. The role of the hardener is to harden the super coat again. So what happens now, I told you already, this super coat is now become spongy, so which makes it absorbable, and which absorbs all the chemicals when, and then throws the, there is, you know, there is, you know, transfer of this chemical process happening through this coat. Now once our process is over, we want the coat to harden back. We cannot leave it soft like that, because if we leave it soft like that, there will be peeling of that entire layer will peel and come off. Okay, so it makes it susceptible to damage even more. So we have to harden it back. We have to bring back the same hardness that it was prior processing. So that is achieved using ammonium sulfate. So it forms a complex with gelatin and prevents damage to the gelatin during subsequent handling of the film. Also reduces the swelling of the film during final wash. Finally, you clear it with water. Now, you rinse it thoroughly with running water. Tap under the tap, you thoroughly rinse it. Try to remove as much as surface chemicals as possible to prevent any further activity of the chemical over the film, and you dry it and visualize the film. So now what happens? What are the changes that happens during film processing? Now look at the image A. Okay, this is the normal the crystal lattice or the crystal arrangement within the emulsion layer. uh, uh, okay, normal. Now look at image B. This is after exposure. Now in this there is a latent image, but it cannot be visualized clearly. Now C is developing. When you develop, what happens is that the exposed silver halide crystals convert to silver grains, solid grains of silver. Okay, so you can see that here and there are grains of these grains of silver halide which are turned black. That is, which is indicative of which is turned into solid grains of silver. Then put it into water, and then when you put it into fixer, which is image D, what happens is that all that unexposed silver halide grains are washed away with the fixer, thus leaving only the exposed silver grains, thus forming an image in your resultant radiograph. This is the steps. These are the steps for processing and IOPA. Okay, so far, so let's just recollect as to what we have discussed in our, or what we have, what has been told to you in your lecture today. Uh, Today we have seen the techniques for taking IOPA. Okay, we have focused today exclusively intraoral radiology. We have focused today exclusively on IOPs. We have seen the two techniques that are used for taking an IOPA, that is the bisecting angle technique and the parallel technique, and the armamentarium used for bisecting angle and parallel technique. In our last lecture, we have discussed about the films that are used, the composition of the films, the constituents of a film packet. Okay, and today we have talked about the technique, how the film along with various holders and armamentarium is positioned inside the patient's mouth, how the patient's head is positioned, and how the tube or the cone is positioned with or without a position indicating device, and an image is taken, an image is acquired or taken. Okay, and then moving on to processing, we also learned how to process the radiographs. Okay, what are the various chemical agents, that is developer and fixer, that are used, and what are the two methods that are there. There is a visual method and there is a time temperature control method. Okay, so let us talk about little bit about the difference in visual method and time temperature control method. I know this is quite a long lecture, but please bear with me. Visual method is when you visualize each step of the method as you go by, whereas time and temperature control method, where everything is done in a controlled environment, that is the temperature of the solution, the temperature of the room, the time, the duration until which you have to immerse the film inside each, everything is predetermined, and the composition of the solution, everything is predetermined and it is done in a predetermined way. Since this lecture is gone a little longer, I'll explain this visual method and time temperature control method more elaborately in our next the next lecture of our series. And we have also seen the steps of processing, the common steps of processing for both these methods, and we briefly seen what does an automatic processor do. Okay, so what next? We'll be discussing a little more in detail about the time, temperature, and visual control methods. We'll be seeing the other techniques and projections in intraoral radiology. Now we have only seen IOPA. There is still bite wing, there is still occlusal radiographs, so we'll be discussing that next. Then image characteristics, that is what is something like, what is a contrast, what is an ideal radiograph, what is image quality, what is quality of an image, all of these things we'll be discussing a little bit. And then there are various techniques that are achieved, that are implemented using intraoral radiography. One important thing is object localization. We'll be seeing a little about that also. and the common faults that can happen while taking and processing radiographs will also be seen in our next lecture.
So,
Suggest that please take a textbook. Like I always insist, please use a standardized textbook. Please do not use notes or any notes that have been passed down from anybody for that matter. Notes are particularly made by a person for their own understanding. It's not for everybody's understanding. So always remember, use a standardized textbook. I would recommend you to use White and Farrow or Eric White's. And if there is any doubt in regards to whatever has been discussed today, please get back to me. You can like contact me via Google Classroom, WhatsApp, or email, or the messaging service that is available in the e-portal. Either way, any doubts we can clarify. And you will be returning to campus soon, so I hope to see you all soon and have a live demonstration of all the above mentioned or whatever we discussed today. When we have a live demonstration, this becomes even more clear, but for you to understand what I'm going to do during a live demonstration, you need to understand the basic principles and the theory of it. So it gives you a much better, clarity while you actually see it happening live. Okay, so meet you next week with the next part of the lecture. Until then, bye.